Hello, welcome back. We are going to be covering castles today. We usually do this about every 2 months, and I want to talk about castles in a bit more depth. We've been going into more depth each time we go into this topic, and hopefully you will have an opportunity to present some of your ideas, learn something new. We'll certainly try to give you as much information as we possibly can. I'm going to put up a poll. How's it going, F Hubba? How are you? And so my suggestion is grab some food, some drink, get comfortable. I'm going to do a small presentation very quickly, and then we'll go into the other aspect of things, which is really building more stuff out from what we have before. This is material that I have not covered necessarily in the past. I am covering new material, as I always want to try and give you something new each time. So I hope you're ready, and we will get started. Okay. Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is... No, I'm not How to D&D. I've forgotten what I am. What channel am I? Oh, that's right. Hi, welcome to How to RPG. My name is Fred Wheeler. This is where we talk about role-playing games, apparently. But that's not really what we're here for today. No, the topic for today is very specific. For those of you who are wanting something like this, we're going to go cover building amazing modular castles for adventures. And the trick is here that all castles are modular, because there really was never one particular design for a castle in medieval times, which means you are open and it's possible for you to build pretty much anything you like under the sun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a list of various rooms that would be associated with a castle, and then you can decide from there what you include in your castle. I will certainly highlight the ones you would normally have that are pretty standard, no matter what kind of castle you have, whether it be a small castle or a large castle. So first off, almost always there's some sort of gatehouse, even on a small castle. It might well simply be part of the keep itself. The Great Hall, you almost always have a Great Hall. This is where people sleep, they eat here, they talk about stuff. It's like a living room. It's where you do almost everything. A chapel's not a standard thing, but you certainly could have a chapel in a larger castle. A kitchen area. Now the kitchen area in a small castle is going to be just part of the Great Hall where the fireplace is, but you can have kitchen areas if you wanted. Stables, not always required, but you might have some sort of temporary stable area outside of a single keep building, but stables in a large castle are pretty standard. Something like a workshop or a smithy. For a large castle you'd have something like that. The keep itself is the fortified central tower. Okay, this is where as I said, this is where people sleep. This is where the Great Hall is. It depends on the keep size too, like how many different rooms you can have in it. So you would certainly have a keep, and it would be made up of, your Great Hall and your sleeping quarters. You're going to have a water well. You're going to have a bore in the ground somewhere. You'll have a bailey of some kind if you have a larger castle. If it's just a single keep tower, then you won't, but a bailey area. This is basically your courtyard. You need towers. If you have a large castle, you'll have towers around the walls. You'll need a curtain wall, which is basically the outer wall of your castle if you've got a larger castle. The dungeon, this is where we keep prisoners. You're going to have a moat. If you have a large castle, you might have dug a trench around this thing and filled it with water. You might have torture chambers for larger castles down below. An execution chamber also could be connected. So both the torture chamber and the execution chamber, if they are separate, may be connected to the dungeon. Usually they will be. You might have an oubliette, which is basically a place where you leave people to die. Okay, pretty horrible. The pantry, you need a place to actually store food, and you might also have a larder. And there's a difference between the pantry and the larder, certainly for larger castles. One is for perishable items, one is for storing meat and keeping things cold. Okay, you have your dining room for larger castles. You have drawing rooms, which is basically like a specialized living room, really. You have bedrooms. The Barbican, you have the storage rooms for various things. Like it's not just food that you need to store a lot of other things. You might have a ballroom for a very large extravagant castle. You have the library, you have bathrooms, or at least one bathroom. You might have cellars down below. These are where you would store your alcohol and your wine and stuff like that. But you might have a cellar for that purpose. You'll have your lavatory, which is also called a garderobe, which I'm not really sure I understand exactly why it's called that, but it's essentially a toilet. Okay. You have your ice house, and the ice house is basically what it sounds like. It's a place where you keep things cool. You've got the solar room, which is another type of living room. You have the boa room, again, a variation on this. Wardrobes, you might have entire rooms set aside, small rooms, as wardrobes. You have your portcullis area. You have your throne room or an audience chamber, which might well serve the same purpose. You know, you might wind up with a great hall that serves the purpose as the throne room or audience chamber, and it's all in one, but they might be separated as well. The buttery, the bottlery. Now, the buttery is what it sounds like. You're churning butter. The bottlery is storing bottles. We'll get more into that. Casement. Now, the casements, I'm going to explain more about that later. The place of arms. The place of arms is where troops gather, basically. You have the war room or the map room. This is where all the planning for all of your assaults, or at least repelling those who are trying to get into your castle, this is where all the planning takes place. You might have a big table and a map there. You have kennels. Now, kennels are for keeping your dogs, if you have dogs, but you might also have a dovecot. Now, what is a dovecot? It's basically a building where you keep birds, and you use them for what purpose? Well, I suppose you could eat them, but they're also used for sending messages by air. This is your new, this is the old version of email, basically. You will have some sort of waste disposal system. It might be very simple. You might even have escape routes and tunnels in your castle that allow you to move around quickly, mostly to escape when the castle is finally ransacked by the intruders, the invaders. So a lot of different things. So once you have a list of the kinds of rooms that you will want in your castle, this is where you can actually start building it. And this is where you start doing your mapping. And I would suggest decide how complicated you want your castle to be first, and then include the rooms, write down a list of the rooms you want, and then you're going to assign them and decide where they're going to be. Hopefully this was useful to you. I hope it was. Thank you to my patrons who support me on Patreon every single week. I want to thank you for watching, and we will be coming back and going to far more detail on castles in the future. But anyway, hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Okay, people, I had decided that if I tried to talk about every single room, that this would be an extremely long presentation, and a presentation that I've kind of repeated in the past. So I have simply given you a list of rooms. Okay, and we're going to do something with it. Now, you might also be aware the last time we were here, we were starting to look at the possibility of making a modular castle system, where you would take certain parts of the castle and build out your castle. It would give you an idea of how long it would take to build it and how much it would cost. And so we will certainly probably get to that point at some point. Whether that's today or another day, I don't know, but certainly, yes, I was trying to be very quick, which is unheard of, like 6 minutes or less. That's not Fred. I am aware, okay? But you know that the rest of it is going to be all about doing stuff, getting stuff done. So I've kind of very briefly gone over certain rooms that you may never have heard of that exist in castles, depending on the type of castle. But you don't really know what's in that room, in that location. And that's what we're going to do next, because that's going to take a little bit of time. Okay? So I thought what I would do is I would refer us to a couple of different websites, and we would pull some of the information and decide on what we think is important and what is not important. But also too, I want to refer you to a couple of books. In my opinion, out of the books that I currently have, I think that the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Ed Edition book is probably, it's got way too much detail, frankly, for a lot of people. But if you wanted detail and information, Gary Gygax has done a lot of his homework here, okay? You get a lot of information. Now, if you want something a little simpler, and it's not so specialised, and none of these books are specialised, they're not just about castle construction, and I know there are specialised books that are like that, but these aren't. I would say if you want to keep it super simple, then this is like a poor substitute, but it can do it. It can do it. The 5e Dungeon Master Guide, in the back there's a bit of information, there's some stuff scattered throughout there, but it's not a lot. But it's like if you want to shortcut everything, you can. And then I would say not a great book, but the Pathfinder Game Mastery Guide First Ed Edition has a small section that sort of gives you a little bit of information, but not as much as you might like. One of the things we're probably not quite so interested in worrying about so much is the fortifications of our castle, because we've kind of covered that stuff in the past. Really, the exploration of a castle comes down to the different areas within the castle, right, as you're exploring the region. So how's it going? F Hubber, Shiner81, hello, and we've got Derp here. So, what's this? Mini Keep started as just the Great Hall, and they added on as they could afford or needed to. And so Fred Hubber makes a good point that you'll find that a lot of castles, when they're first put down, because they take so long to build, that the first building might well be the Great Hall. It wouldn't be unusual to have a wooden fortress nearby to protect the construction of your castle, because laying stone and brick is expensive and it's a valuable resource, so it could be stolen. You'd have to have some sort of guard system and some sort of place to actually, whether you're using tents or whether you're using a wooden fortress. A wooden fortress can be put up very quickly, and it would help protect your castle as it's been constructed. Something that I think a lot of people sort of forget. Anyway, that's beside the point here. This is not why you're here. You're here to get a bit more information. So let me just get comfortable, and let us continue on our journey. Really, we're looking at trying to build more modular castles. And one of the first things I decided initially, I was like, well, we need to know how much it's going to take, how much it's going to cost, how much it's going to, how much space it takes up, how long it takes to build. But actually, I don't think that's the important aspect that you really need. I think what you need is you need to know what's in those rooms so that you don't have to go and do research to find that information. Okay, so I think that's what we're going to cover. Castle rooms. So I'll pull up a website that will assist us a little bit. Not a huge amount, but a little bit. And I will pull us over to our document. I'll grab my phone and we'll get started. So for those of you who have not watched this before, I'm happy to go over some of the rooms and locations we've already done, okay, so that you kind of have an idea of what's there. But the intention here is to give you additional information we didn't do before. So I think actually trying to decide what's actually in the room is going to sort of solve a lot of your problems in terms of your construction, because your castle is really just made up of a series of rooms or areas, right? Okay, so let's pull across to our document, and let's go here, and I need to pull over to this. Yep, that's the one. That's what we wanted. Here we go. Here we go. This is castle layout. So there's a couple of different locations. I'll go over these very briefly, and then we're going to go straight into the crux of it and like building out everything so you know what's there. Okay, all right. So I did a little bit of research before I started the live stream, just to speed up this process. But like everything, I don't always have time to cover everything exactly in and complete. It's not always complete, people. Sometimes I just can't get it all done. Because we're not really talking about one topic in one video. We're really talking about many topics in many videos. Okay, so for those of you who are unaware, we kind of have a couple of locations we've already done. So this is the gatehouse, the most defensible part of your fortress, positioned at the castle entrance. A gatehouse usually contains multiple traps and obstacles to stop intruders. These will be things like a strengthened gate or portcullis, murder holes, boiling oil, a drawbridge, your machinations, your arrow slits. You'll have it connected probably to sleeping quarters for troops called the guard house. So the guard house and the gatehouse are often connected in some way. Another major area of your castle is the Great Hall. This is the large room with a fireplace, long tables and benches. Great halls usually had multiple purposes, so this is for like eating meals. Business is conducted here. Regional judgment might be administered, so whoever was in that region might be. This is basically where your court was. The Great Hall would act as a courthouse. Entertainment would be performed here. Servants would sleep here at night on straw in the Great Hall quite often. You have the chapel, which is usually very small. It's going to consist of an altar, table, a lectern, a pulpit possibly, bench seats, your candlesticks, your holy symbols, possibly a small piano if there's space, and then your religious box, okay? I might just add in here. Religious books, but I suppose another way, what's the other thing I can say here? Songbooks. It's not really a religious book, is it? So let's just put songbooks in here. The kitchen, this is usually very neat and clean. You have to, otherwise it winds up going up in flames. So you're going to have your wooden workbenches here. I don't think there was that many concrete workbenches back in the day. Mostly wooden workbenches because they're cheap to make. A cooking alcove for hot coals, a cauldron, your butter and cream tuning barrels, your meat spit and skewers, your clay pots, your cooking utensils, things like that. Then your stables, this includes a number of horse stalls, usually with a main corridor down the middle, but not always. If you had a very small stable, you might have it only just running down. You might have stalls only on one side. Okay, and what sort of things you're going to find here? You're going to find hay on the floor, animal feed buckets, buckets and bags, buckets for cleaning, yard brooms, shovels, rakes, spits and bridle hanging on the wall, heavy blankets for putting down on the horse, so that the saddles are going to be stacked up here. Your horseshoes and your horse grooming toolbox. Okay, your workshop or your smithy is going to be a little bit. I've covered forges before and smithies, but this is where you have a forge with a range of blacksmithing tools. This will have probably more than one anvil, not just one anvil, but a couple of them. Hammers and vices, tongs, chisels, punches for punching holes. Bags of coal for feeding that forge, handy tools for doing all sorts of different things, and your cone mandrel. Okay, you're going to probably have more than one cone mandrel, probably one or two, a small one and a medium size. Your keep, this is usually the fortified central tower. This is would be probably one of the first buildings to go down, and they contain the Great Hall, the sleeping quarters, and depending on the size of your keep. But that's the two key things you would generally find here. But there's always going to be a Great Hall. Your water well, usually the only source of water for your castle during a siege, and it's going to be a deep bore. Okay. Your bailey, which is the inner courtyard if you do have a wall around your castle, and this is made up of the important. So the bailey consists of all the important buildings around a courtyard. You might have kitchens here, chapels, barracks for troops. Stables, workshops, servant houses and halls. Pardon me. And some castles will have an inner and an outer bailey depending on how large they were. Not all castles had a bailey, but I've seen a few plans that consist of up to 4 baileys, so that's quite a few different layers of defence. Tower, these are towers that you would put around along the castle walls to help protect it, particularly at a joint where there might be a weakness, or you need a defensive point. So you'd have a tower here. These are defensive lookouts, so you get a better view of what's going on, and they allow you to hide, not just from using battlements, but to hide from missile fire. Towers are a bit more efficient at doing that. You've got your curtain wall, which is the strongest built outer wall that surrounds your keep and your bailey. You'll have your dungeon underneath if you have a very large castle, where you'll have your prisoner cells. You'll have your moat around a large castle. The only time you have a moat is when you're dealing with fairly flat land. If you're on a mountainside, you don't need to have a moat. The mountain itself creates the barrier for entry, and these can be filled with water. Just makes it harder for invaders to cross. But you can also throw oil onto that water and light it to make it even more dangerous. I talked about torture chambers. We've talked about torture chambers in the past. And then you've got your execution chamber. Now, you're not always going to have a dungeon that includes a prison cells, then a separate one that has torture chambers, then a separate one that has an execution chamber. But you could. But it's not always going to be the case. Okay. All right. So now that I've kind of gone over the stuff we have done before, a lot of the stuff we've already covered. Okay. This is all the stuff that we haven't really covered. And we will probably get into the gist of like how to go about building a modular castle. I have already decided that there needs to be certain things that we worry about in terms of cost and how long it takes. And we'll use Gary's guidelines because I think they're probably going to be more useful to us than anything else. I don't honestly have too much faith in a lot of the stuff that Wizards of the Coast has put together, because I think most of the time they've just really copied what Gary was doing anyway. And their concept of research is not not great. Not to say that your castles need to be accurate to history. Like, it's not really a requirement, is it? Okay, so let's go with torture chamber. Now, if I remember right, we had covered dungeons. And in dungeons, I had sort of built out a whole lot of information about what you find in a dungeon. Martin and Bailey came from the practice of digging a circle and pile of dirt in the middle. Yes, they really weren't meant to have a donut-shaped pond around the castle. They wanted the castle higher. So you dig your trench and you put the dirt in the middle, and then you build a structure on top of the dirt. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and grab everything that we have talked about in the past with regard to dungeons and see if we can sort of shorten that up a bit and plop that in, because I think that's going to be kind of a little bit useful to do that. Make it a bit faster. Make it a bit quicker, give you a better idea of what's supposed to be there. For those of you who might have missed the one we did on dungeon chambers and so forth. So running adventures, dungeons. No, let's keep going down. That's preparation, dungeons. Here we go, running adventures, exploring dungeons. And I had written way too much information on dungeons. But what we want is not so much the general information on dungeons. What we want is what you find in a dungeon. Yeah. So let us find that first. Torture chamber. Here we go. So way too much information to include in one section. So we're going to shorten this up. I'm going to take a lot of these ideas. What do you find in a dungeon? So what is it? And then what do you find? I think that's the best way to go. Yeah. I just need to drink some water and put a lozenge in my mouth. I'm ready to go after that. So I'm not going to explain absolutely every single part of our dungeon. What I will do is I will at least give some connective tissue to it. Okay. The dungeon underneath a large castle might include prison cells in the form of deep holes. Is it easy to just have a deep hole, or cages, or iron cages? Okay, so your prison cell might be just a deep hole or prison cage, or something else like that. So that's the prison side of things. Our torture chamber is different. As you would expect, there's not going to be much in the prison cells. It's going to be pretty minimal, okay? There may be hay on the floor to sleep on. And that's it. There wouldn't be very much in the prison cells itself. The torture chamber is going to be made up of a lot of other things. So connected to the dungeon area of the castle for, now, what are we going to call this? So the wine cellar, I've got cellar down already. So if you're wondering if I have included the cellar, I can assure you I have. We have cellar here. We'll get to cellar shortly. But I wanted to do the torture chamber since we've covered torture chambers before. No, you're right. So a castle dungeon is not the same thing as a D&D dungeon. A D&D dungeon is a much broader category, exactly. And that's what we're talking about here is castles. It's not talking about Dungeons and Dragons dungeons. A Dungeons and Dragons dungeon, okay, is a maze. Okay, it's got a very different purpose. But we can take the torture chamber stuff and we can fill out and give you a kind of a list of the sorts of things you would find there. So connected to the dungeon area of a castle for performing interrogation. The equipment found in a torture chamber is the following. So let's build it out for you so you've got an idea of what to stick into your torture chamber. And instead of it being the long-winded thing that I created a little while back, it'll be a lot smaller. Okay. So crow's cage. No. Now we can put a crow's cage into here. We can put the crow's cage into here. Deep hole. Crow's cage. Rare to have crow's cage in a dungeon because usually they would be outside, but you could have one there if you wanted. If the ceiling was high enough, it would happen. Okay, so crow's cage is not really in the torture chamber because we're torturing people here. Next, the giblet. So we'll take the giblet. If you don't know what the giblet is, basically this is like a gallows. It's like a public execution or gallows. Okay, that's the giblet. Now actually we might be able to put that into the execution area when I think about it, because this is really execution rather than torture. This is execution, so let's put that there. Death, the equipment, equip and used for execution. And let's do our giblet here. Here we go. Let's do without that'll do. Cool. Right. Real world, the D&D, most of the torture and the torture and the what? I can't actually scroll that down, so I can't see it. Okay, sorry. I can't see what you were trying to say, Fred. It's not clear. All right, so there's our giblet. Goes into the execution area. The Strapedo, this is a torture device. Strapedo is basically simple ropes and pulley system for stretching you out and making you a lot taller. Great for rectifying those problems in your back. Actually, probably not. It's probably going to dislocate a lot of things and cause an awful lot of pain. So this is a torture device for sure. So we'll put our torture device here. Well, I suppose that would be very true, but I don't think that would always be the case. There are certain things you would do openly, but a lot of it wouldn't happen openly. Sometimes I wish someone would put me on in the rack and just give it a gentle pull instead of... Right, you want to get rid of those back issues, right? Just to stick me on the rack and give me a stretch. Exactly. The Iron Maiden, which is this is the thing. This is like a coffin, iron coffin. It didn't always have spikes on the inside of it, people. Sometimes it was just used to heat people up, basically, and or just confine them in such a way that it was really uncomfortable because you were in a standing position for a very long time. So there's a lot of different... I think everybody assumes that the Iron Maiden has spikes on the inside of the coffin. The wooden horse, we're going to just call it the wooden horse because it's got a lot of different names. And basically, sitting on that thing was like having your nuts and your ass have a great huge wedgie shoved up it. Okay. Sometimes they put spikes on there, but usually it wasn't. It was just really uncomfortable to sit on, and it would hurt your buttocks and your genitals. So that is definitely a torture device, the wooden horse. So we'll put the wooden horse in here. We might actually give it capitals as well to indicate that this is not like your riding horse, people. This is not the riding horse you give to your kids. Okay, it's the exact opposite. So we have the wooden horse. Next, the guillotine. Now the guillotine is not a torture device. This thing is used to decapitate you, take off your head. It is an execution device. So we'll put it into the execution chamber. We'll leave it over here. And we'll take out the formatting. There we go. Cool. The rack. The rack is definitely a torture device. So this is the thing that stretches you. Okay, you're probably very familiar with it. We've talked about it before. The rack. So you're probably starting to realize you can see what I'm trying to do. I'm taking each room and trying to give you enough information so you don't have to go somewhere else to find out the information on it and put it in one place. Okay, the iron chair is a torture device. It's not used to kill people. Basically, you got strapped down and it had an iron brass plate on it, and it'd cook you, roast you on this thing. Sometimes they had spikes on them, sometimes they didn't. There were all sorts of variations on this thing. But the iron chair, pretty common piece of equipment for torture. The cat's paw, basically 3 prongs that was used to sort of shred your flesh. That is definitely a torture device. Oh, hang on, we've forgotten the Pilroy. So for those of you who are unsure what the Pilroy is, basically this is the thing that would be used in public, but you could have them in a torture chamber, and it would be used to hold you in place, your hands and your head, as they had their way with you. So the Pilroy. And we'll give that a capital. Pilroy. I'm going to just keep drinking water and grab myself a lozenge. Okay, let's continue on our merry journey, which is we did the Pilroy, the cat's paw, as I just explained. This is basically Wolverine's claws scraped along your flesh. Really fun time, that one. So let's include that. That's something you could include if you want to. Next. Oh, we probably should mention too that there's usually going to be an open fire pit. So connected to with a open fire pit. Why? because fire was a form of torture, and heat's down there. You'd heat up various metal implements to do all sorts of horrible things. There's the head cage. We can place that. That there is a torture device as well. It's basically, for those of you who are thinking, it's basically a cage that you just put on your head. Okay, so we'll paste that head cage. A little bit like the thing they stuck on, if you ever watched the movie Man with the Iron Mask with Leonardo, then you'll be familiar with that one. Okay, now thumb screws. Very popular. These are definitely going to be in the torture chamber, so we'll put that there. Thumb screws. And these were designed to sort of separate the fingers. Put a lot of pressure on your fingers and mostly your thumb, actually. Tiger's chair, steel chair with iron leggings for restraining you. Often a really horrible position. Like, imagine you've been tied up like a yoga. You've been doing some yoga and now you're stuck. This is the tiger's chair. What do you got here? Okay. I'm hoping that people are keeping up with me. For those of you who've already seen a lot of the stuff on torture chambers with me, this won't be new to you. Manacles and ropes. So manacles and ropes, really not something you're going to find necessarily in well, you're going to find in both the dungeon area. You're going to find it in all those areas. Manacles and ropes are pretty common. So we'll go over here. Manacles, ropes, and then we're going to go cut and paste, because really you can find them in all those locations. So your dungeon, so let's just do, and let's include this. Manacles and ropes, paste. Okay, all right, next. Oh, the brazen bull. This is a torture device, although a lot of people wind up dying from this thing, so we'll put it in the torture chamber area. Basically, a big bull, you stick somebody inside. It's made of brass or bronze, and you heat it up, and they simply start to cook slowly inside. Very painful. Okay. Branding irons. So that's under torture. So we'll put branding irons here. Let's try to spell it correctly though. Branding irons. Okay, cool. And moving down, and let's see, where's the next thing? Branding irons, and then I think, acoustically designed. We don't need to worry about that, but did I get everything where I needed to have it? I needed to put this here. Cut, copy. The execution chamber. So, what are we going to find here? We're going to find a guillotine, giblet. Hangman's frame. And there's probably a few more that I have missed along the way here, because I used to kill people in all sorts of different horrible ways. Okay, but that sort of gives you your dungeon, your torture chamber execution. We'll move this, because that's pretty much done, and we'll put that a little bit further down. Probably about here. Paste. And then we'll go into the oubliette. The oubliette is exactly what it sounds like. It's really just another way of executing somebody, but in the most horrible manner you can imagine, which usually meant you leave them to die, and they'll dehydrate and starve. So let's find a proper definition for oubliette. And we'll give... quite often it was just a hole, nothing else, like just a deep hole. So it's a bottle dungeon. So you know how I was saying you could have a hole, and in this case you might have like an iron grate over the top of it, or what else? What's another way of saying this? You could have a wooden trapdoor to close it off, and yeah, you would just leave them and just wait until they perished, and when they died you just take them away. So it's a basement room which is accessible only from a hatch or a hole and a high ceiling. Copy. So we will take this and we will, okay, a basement room which is accessible only from a hatch or hole. Let's get rid of this, and a high ceiling. High ceiling. So individuals are left here to starve and dehydrate. Hydrate. It's not hydrate, is it? Nope. To starve and dehydrate. So, pretty awful way to die. So there's your oubliette if you decide you want to have an oubliette. And a few of you might be familiar with the oubliette from the Labyrinth movie with, is it Jennifer Connelly? I think it's Jennifer Connelly. All right, next, this here. This is kind of like a version of the gatehouse. It's just got a particular name, so let's just go meaning. So this is it here. So this is on the outer defensive wall of a walled city, especially a double sort of tower above a gate or a drawbridge. This is basically what you're dealing with here. It's basically an area. There isn't much there, really. You might find a portcullis, that'd be about it. A gate door. Now, pardon me, people, while I hit my buttons again. Keeping up with the chat. Now, was there something else? I can't remember. No, I'm pretty sure that's it. There isn't much else to it. They've usually got a weird shape to them too. They usually got a weird shape to them. If I've missed anything on that, you'll let me know, but I'm pretty sure that's it. Okay, next. Pantry. So what do you find in a kitchen pantry? Well, that's a good question. So there's a couple of websites out there. I've actually found that recently there's better websites for dealing with all of this stuff than there used to be in the past. Buttery, Pantry. There we go. That's what we want. So we will kind of zoom this in, I think. Okay. Pantry is a room where food, provisions, or dishes are stored. So an auxiliary capacity to the kitchen. So we will take that. So this is where we're going to find a lot of, not just food, but other stuff. So let's do that. So a room with food, provisions, and dishes So that's plates, bowls, cups, and cutlery. Cutlery. This is where you're going to find that are stored and serve as an auxiliary capacity to the kitchen. Okay, so there's your pantry. Let's just check to make sure we got all the information we needed from that. Derived from the word is from the same source as the old French term patrias. Okay, pain. So in late medieval hall there were separate rooms for the various service functions and food storage. A pantry was where bread was kept and food prepared associated with it. Okay. Head of okay, so let's put in here provisions, food provisions. We'll put in here bread. Bread was a big thing, so let's include that as well. Cats, mice, bugs, flour, sugar, yes. And yeah, probably a good idea to give you a few foodstuffs. Let's do that. Let's give you some provisions that would. Let's give you a bit of a list, so you don't have to think about that. And let's get rid of my hat because it's not helping me think clearly. So bread, flour, sugar, fat. What else? Tea, eggs. Now I can't remember. Are eggs kept in the pantry? I think they were. I think eggs were kept in the pantry. I'm just trying to remember if they were kept in cold storage or not. I don't know exactly. What else would you keep in a pantry in terms of what do we do? What do we have here? Flour, sugar, fat, eggs. It's. Oh, I think that's. I mean, that's most of it, isn't it? Throne room, murder hole. Well, we've got murder hole already associated with the gatehouse, so we don't have to cover that anymore. I've got throne room. We'll get to the throne room. And yeah, throne room again is like it's optional for sure. So let's do that. Let's do another search. What food do you find in a medieval, come on, try that again, Fred. Medieval pantry. I don't know. Oh, well, somebody's asked that question before. Let's have a look. Bread. So they said bread. So anything that is used to make bread. Salt. Because one of the things we used to do when I was going camping is we'd make damper, and you need to have salt to make bread. So you would definitely have salt as well. Pepper. Herbs. Probably your dry herbs will be here. The film on eggs keeps it safe for... yeah, okay. Yeah, so I don't think we're going to be refrigerating them. There's no fridge. There's going to be limited storage in your ice house or your cold storage area anyway. Anyway, so let's keep going. Make sure we've got all the things so you don't have to look it up. plates. Cabbage, beans, oats. Oh, I forgot about that. Bacon, poultry, cheese. Cheese, I would believe, would be there. Bacon, possibly, because it's cured. Poultry, milk. So let's take this and beans, and then we'll put our oats in here as well. Oats. Probably the reason they had cabbage and beans is because cabbage and beans are so easy to grow. And then, of course, we've got cheese, bacon, and poultry. Milk. I need to remember milk, because milk would be a big factor too. Although I tend to think you would have that in cold storage, but you might have it in a pantry as well. So we'll put milk. You wouldn't have to be able to leave it there for long though. Cheese is not a problem. Cheese is pretty good at surviving. As long as you put a coating over it, she's all good for quite a while. Poultry. I feel like poultry might wind up being in a cold storage area, but we'll put this down. So that gives you something to fill up your pantry with when you need to write up your list. So it's all done for you. Cutlery. There we go. That's better. The canned chicken. We're not going to have canned chicken. Salted pork. Salted meats. Yes, salted meats would make sense. Yes, cheese. They used to make their own cream and cheese back in the day. So, yeah, absolutely. Something like milk products is pretty common. Oh, butter. That's another thing. You would have butter. Although you might wind up having that in cold storage as well. Let's put down butter for now, though. Because they made their own butter. It didn't stay there for long. They made up what butter they needed as they went. So it's not like you would have it stored for any length of time. If anything, it was going to be in the buttery rather than the pantry. So actually, I might take butter off because that's actually probably in the wrong place. You probably won't have that. Salted meats. Salted meats. And poultry. Okay, all right, there's our pantry filled out for you. Larder. Again, larder's very similar to the pantry. My understanding is it was cold storage though. So we might shift a few things from our pantry over to that. We'll see how we go. I'm kind of tempted to come back and do larder later just because of that fact. What food do you find? What do you find? What do you find in a castle larder? Okay. Oh, this is the cold storage. That's right, cold storage. So anything that would go off is here. Larder is a cool area for storing food prior to use. Copy. And we'll put in a little bit of written text. Okay, a larder was a cool area. Let's just get rid of that. A cool area for storing food prior to use. Perishable. Perishable foods are kept here. So our perishable foods. Yes, that's probably where I need to put the lard too. By the 18th century, the term had been expanded. At that point, a dry larder was where bread, pastry, milk, butter, and cooked meats were stored. Okay, so bread, no. Pastry. So raw meat. Copy. So raw meat would be in our larder because this is going to likely go off. Lard or fat. We will take our fat out here because that's cold storage. What was the other one? Not going to be that one, not going to be that one. Milk though. Yes, milk. Cut it from there and we'll put it into the larder. It's much more likely to be there. And what else was there? We've got salted meats we don't have to worry about. Bacon is a salted meat really too, back in the day. Dairy products. I believe butter would have probably also been kept here. Milk and butter. So there we go, butter. But again, as I said, they made their own butter, so they usually would not have a lot of butter on hand. It would be made at the beginning of the day. They would use up everything they could, and then it would go into cold storage if it could be kept for very long. And yeah, you never made up too much. They had usually a pretty good idea of how much they needed to make. So raw lard, raw meat, fat, milk, butter, cheese. I don't know that they necessarily needed to worry about because the point of cheese, it was a food that you could keep for a long time. Yeah, so the larder's name comes from the fact they would take raw meat and they would put lard over it to help keep it from rotting. Quite a disgusting idea for sure. Just about wasn't any cold storage. Milk was gotten from the cow or goat daily. Yes, that's another point. It's like milk and butter. You wouldn't really find an awful lot of that in there. But if it was anywhere, it's going to be in the cold storage while it was being used during the day, so it didn't go off during the day. Okay, so next, let us deal with our next little problem here. Larder. So there's a huge section here on the larder. So I'm kind of interested to read this. We have a buttery as well, which is yeah, the buttery. Dear. Anyway, so let's go back to larder. A larder is a cool area for storing food prior to use. Yes, we know this. Larders were commonplace in houses before the spread in use of the refrigerator. Essential qualities of the larder are that they could be as cool as possible, close to food preparation areas, constructed so as to exclude flies and vermin, easy to keep clean, and equipped with shelves and cupboards appropriate for the food being stored. Okay, so we're going to add some cupboards into our larder. So this is food that we've got to be careful doesn't get destroyed. So we'll put in here, cool area for the storage of food prior to use with cupboards. There we go. We have our cupboards now. Right, back to here. Next, cupboards and shelves. We'll add shelves as well. I should have put that down. Okay, sweet. Next, what else? In the northern hemisphere, most houses would arrange to have their larder and kitchen on the north side or east side of the house where it received the least amount of sun. Interesting. Many larders have small, unglazed windows with the window open, covered in fine mesh. This allows free circulation of air without allowing flies to enter. Okay, so this is a mesh window. Many larders have tiled or painted walls to simplify cleaning. Tiled and painted walls. Interesting. Well, I'm learning a lot. Shelves. Tiled. Painted walls. Mesh windows. Okay, what else have we got here? Yeah, so yeah, that's true. Some cheeses do need cooling, some don't, for sure. Okay, so now let's learning more about our larder. Circulation. Many larders have tile-based floors. Okay, simplify cleaning. Older larders, and especially those in the larger houses, have hooks on the ceiling to hang joints of meat or game. Meat hooks. So we're going to include some meat hooks. Others have insulated containers for ice. Interesting. Well, let's add meat hooks because that sounds promising. Meat hooks and icebox. An icebox is not the kind of icebox you're thinking, people. It's literally going to be a box you put ice in. A pantry may contain a stone slab or shelf used to keep food cool in the day before refrigeration was domestically available. In the late medieval hall, a thrall would have been appropriate to a larder. And a moderately large 19th century house. All these rooms have, okay, all right. For, what's this responsible for? Meat and fish as well as room. Okay. Scott's term for the larder was these. Okay, all right, so that just gives us a sort of a breakdown. Well, I think we've got all of the things we would need to have here. Sorcery and scullery, such as the sorcery and scullery. Okay, all right, so that's that one. This is fun. This is all about alcohol, people. You're going to love that. So we have all of our various things that we would find in our larder, plus the kinds of foods we would find there. Sweet. And it's top of the hour. And I think it's going to be nice to sort of skip past this one, since we've done a little bit of work. It takes a little bit of time to get it done. But the buttery is probably the next topic I want to cover, because the buttery is the one that's on list here, and sort of getting a breakdown of what the buttery is would be nice. So I am going to take a quick break, go use the toilet, come back, and we will continue. All right, 5 minutes or less, I'll be back. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, I'm back. Where we continue on. All right, so where are we? We're here. The Buttery. Last time we were talking Buttery. The Buttery was a domestic room in a castle or large medieval house. It was one of the offices pertaining to the kitchen. It was generally a room close to the Great Hall and was traditionally the place from which the yeomen of the Buttery served beer and candles to those of the lower members of the house, not entitled to drink wine. So, I guess the best way to explain this room is this is where the servants got their beer. They weren't allowed to get it from the other location, like the wine cellars, because wine was more expensive, of course, than beer. So they got the dregs. It's a lot simpler little area. As you can see, there's just a couple of barrels there, and that's where you would fill from. The beer butts or barrels stored here. So this is an easy room for us to fill out. I think the key thing here that we need to put in here is it is storing beer and candles. And we'll go into here, the Buttery. A small room that served and stored beer and candles for servants and lower household members. I guess that's the best way to describe it. Lovely, isn't it? So what do we find here? The Buttery had a few beer barrels, boxes of candles, and what else do we need to stick in here so that we get this filled out properly? Yeah, so the Buttery was not like the beer cellar. The beer cellar and the wine cellar were separate, so this is if it had a really big area. What else would we have here? I'm just trying to think. I would say you'd probably have what? You'd probably have a few containers and pitchers here. It'd probably be fairly standard, wouldn't it? Because you'd have to serve into something. So we'll include a couple of other things. So mugs and jugs. Containers. Okay. All right. So that's the Buttery. Next, moving on in our little quest, and that's the Buttery. The gatehouse and the guardhouse we don't have to deal with. We've covered them pretty extensively. The oratory, I'm not sure we need to do the oratory because I feel like the oratory was really sort of the same sort of thing. Usually the oratory was just the chapel, if you ask me. So it's basically still just a chapel. It's just a different name, oratory. And do I have oratory down here as a separate thing, or did I actually include it as part of the... I don't know if I did. Did I say oratory in chapel? It probably would help. Oratory or chapel. Or I believe that's right. Oratory or chapel. Chapel or oratory. One of those. One of those things. Okay, cool. God. So some of the more elaborate castles would have these cabinets and boudoirs. I'm not sure I want to cover boudoirs and cabinets. Let's just copy this for now, and I'll think about it, because we're really getting into some high fundangled stuff when we start talking about that sort of thing. There's so many of these sorts of rooms in a castle. I'm not sure how useful talking about them is going to be. So let's go here. Let's do that. All right, next. I might come back to it. We'll see. All right, so here's where we'll probably want to start working on, because these are areas that are quite large, and they had certain purposes, so we want to deal with them. So the casement. A casement was originally a vaulted chamber, usually constructed underneath the rampart. It was intended to be impenetrable and could be used for sheltering troops or storage. So the casement, so imagine you have artillery fire. Now, whether that's arrows or bolts from crossbows or catapult fire, you could go here and it provides some sort of protection from that as they fire over the wall of your castle. So that's really what the casement was all about, was providing that sort of protection from the troops. You don't really want your troops standing in the courtyard if there's missile fire landing in the courtyard, you know. So, you know, the bailey wasn't necessarily the best place to be standing for your important and valuable troops. So we're going to copy and paste this into casement. So paste. Casement was originally so a vaulted. I'm not going to say originally. It's a vaulted chamber, usually constructed underneath rampart. Okay, intended. There's very little to it. There's so little. You know, the rampart, not the rampart, the casement is such a simple structure. There's not much going on here. It is just a vaulted area, usually with arches, right? The garden. You want to add in the garden. Yeah, there's not too many gardens that. Oh yeah, I suppose if you're looking at a castle that isn't sort of like a fortified castle, there might be a garden. Or if you've got a very large castle area, there might be a garden. Let's put down garden. We're going to put garden over here. There we go. I have added it, derp. It is added to the list. There's bound to be a few of you who are wondering what the heck the place of arms is, but we'll get there. So the next one, place of arms. So the room in a castle called the place of arms was a large area in a covered way where troops could assemble. So when it says in a covered way, what it essentially means is a passageway. Okay, so we'll cut and place that there. So that is it's going to be a larger pathway or passageway than normal place of arms. Not all castles have to have all these things, by the way, people. You don't have to look at it and think, oh my God, Fred, are you kidding? So it's a large area. Had a similar function to a casement, but it's different because it's a passageway, whereas the casement is like a big sort of area. It's not narrow. Covered way. So let's do this. Make sure we've got everything we need here. I'm pretty sure that's that's the extent of it. But do you find in a paste? Place of fortitude where troops could gather. What is the place? What is the place of the placing arms? No, large area. Covered way designed as a assembly point for troops, or a square in the center of. Okay, so it had a couple of different. So it's very similar to the casement, isn't it? Troops will assemble in defense. Covered way of fortification. Okay, all right. We've covered that. That's done. There's nothing really in there. It's just an area. The undercroft. Cellar, storage, often vaulted. So is there much that we need to sort of mention about that? I don't think there is. Oh, we've got the ice house too, people. I discovered there are a few castles that have ice houses, which you would think, well, isn't that the Larder? But apparently it's not. Apparently it's not. So we will go here, cut this, and put our undercroft in. Did I have undercroft here? Or did I lose it? Somewhere I might have put it somewhere else. Undercroft. Ice house. Have I left it out? Maybe I've left it out. That'll be what's going on here. So let's go here. Paste. And undercroft. Copy and put this in. No. Yes. Something like that. Let's have another drink of water. I'm getting dry fast. When I was doing research, I was really surprised. I didn't realize they have a Dovecot, which is basically a birdhouse. I'm going to make sense. Okay, so the undercroft. So it's a cellar or storage room, often vaulted. While some were used as simple storage rooms, others were rented out as shops. For example, the undercroft rooms. Okay. We have a kitchen, a range of stores. The undercroft beneath the House of Lords or place at Westminster, rented out. Okay. Rented out to the conspirators behind the gunpowder plot in 1605. Many early medieval undercrofts were vaulted or groined, such as the vaulted chambers of. Okay, all right. So this is, if you had an undercroft, you might well have vaulted. The undercroft might be rented out to now what is it? Individuals operating a shop. Okay, I think we've got that one right. Okay. There we go. So you know what your undercroft is. Next. Pigeon nests, cage rooms. Well, that's your Dovecot, basically. A lawn. The original purpose of the lawn was to display an abundance on wealth, food, and available labour. Just wasting fertilizer, land to grow inedible grass and a lawn. Okay. Right, next. Ice house. I haven't found too many pictures of an ice house, but they did apparently exist, and they looked very different. You've got one that looks like basically a cave. You've got one that's looks like a sort of a domed little stone building, and one that looks like it's Professor X's Cerebro with a whole lot of timbers lying over the top of it. And then you got a fancy one here. So let's have a look at the ice house. The ice house was just that, a specialized insulated house to keep ice. So that is as simple as this. We just need to know what you would find in it for your ice house, and your ice house is done. If you're going to include one, which you might not. Ice house. Alright, so let's have a look at and read through this section. I have read through these sections before, people. I just don't remember everything. And I think the Dovecot is next, so we might cover the Dovecot, which is kind of a little bit different. Okay. During the winter, ice and snow would be taken into the ice house and packed with insulation, often straw and sawdust. So we're going to have ice, straw, and snow in here. Good. Okay, ice was stored in, now I'm pretty sure it was stored in like stone or brick boxes, insulated with straw and what the heck was the other one? Straw and sawdust. Easily available. Well, that's not sawdust, but maybe that is. There we go. Sawdust. Okay, so packed with sawdust. It would remain frozen for many months, often until the following winter, and would be used as a source of ice during summer months. The main application of the ice was the storage of perishable foods, but it could also be used simply to cool drinks or allow ice cream and sorbent desserts to be prepared. So, interesting. Okay. Let us do this. Let us include a few things. So, allows storage of, and what do we got? We're going to stick in a few things. We're going to put in here of perishable foods, cool drinks, and ice cream. And what's the other one? Sorbent desserts. There we go. Were you expecting that one? I I know they did have it back in the day, but you wouldn't think. So if you had a fridge, it seems very, very hard to do. Anyway, ice house are found in a ha-ha walls, house, stable, basements, woodland banks, and even open fields. The most common designs involved underground chambers, usually man-made, and built close to a natural sources of winter ice, such as a freshwater lake. Ice houses varied in design depending on the date and builder, but were mainly conical or round at the bottom to hold melted ice. They usually had a drain to keep away, to keep away water. So we're going to include a drain and a domed structure. It's a domed structure, okay. A special insulated domed house, and most of them are made of stone, domed stone house. So I think that's that one. Okay, what else do we need to have in here? Man-made, depending on natural sources, Ice house was formally introduced in Britain in 1660, although they are occasionally examples of surviving from medieval periods. British ice houses were commonly brick-lined domed structures, most of their volume underground, so we need to include a drain with a drain. Forgot about that, didn't I? A drain. Okay, specialised insulated domed stone house to keep ice with a drain. Okay. There's a lot more information on them, and I'm not sure that we needed to go into that because it's more about the history of them than anything else. The Dovecot is a different thing. Okay. Exactly what you would think. And as you'd mentioned before, Derry, how's it going? You'd mentioned pigeons. So yes, pigeons are a thing. So let's find our Dovecot and build it out. A building intended to house pigeons or doves. Now what it looked like. So here's a couple of examples of a Dovecot in terms of pictures. And Dovecots were a big thing. I didn't realize they were so important, but there's a huge section on Dovecots here. We're not going to go through all of it. Okay, I'm going to tell you that now. All we need is what does it look like, okay? What does it look like and what's inside it? And that's it. Doves may be square or circular freestanding structures or built into the end of a house or barn. They generally contain pigeonholes for the birds to nest. Pigeons and doves were an important food source. Oh, we're going to have a snacky. Yep. And they were kept for their eggs, fresh flesh and dung. So you want to have their poo, you want to have their eggs, and you want to eat them. Oh gosh. So not a lot of messaging going on, but Dovecots. It's like keeping chickens, isn't it? Obviously, pigeon and doves are tastier. maybe that's the thing. They're a bit tastier. Don't make quite as much noise, maybe? I doubt it. Birds just make a lot of noise. Okay. In medieval Europe, the possession of Dovecot was a symbol of status and power and was regulated by law. Really? Only nobles had their special privilege known as a drot de... oh, whatever. Who cares? Okay, their location is chosen away from the large trees that can house raptors and shielded from prevailing winds. Okay, so this is where we are going to get a little tricky. We need to have a stone or wooden pillars, circular, hexagonal, or square. There's so many different types though. Okay. So what's the best way? Circular, square, round. Let's go with this. I think that's the extent of the building. That's really what we're after in terms of the Dovecot. They were made from stone or wood. With a cylindrical, hexagonal, or square shape. Now, holes were positioned to allow birds to nest so they could collect eggs and dung. There we go. Lovely. Yeah, I believe you. I believe that the I believe the the falcons and the hawks would be kept somewhere else for sure. Absolutely, totally get that one. So that is our dovecot. Now, have we exhausted this one here? I think we have. I'm not going to go over that. Apartments, no. Okay, so scrolling back up here. Is there anything that I've missed? I think we've covered most of the things that were here. I did not want to do the bidets. Really didn't want to cover that at all. We've done the buttery. We've done the larder, the pantry. Kitchens, pantries, butteries. Yeah, it's all there. Bathrooms, lavatory. We didn't kind of really cover the lavatory. The solar is another one which we haven't covered, but maybe we should go into the lavatory a little bit more. It's basically privy. And given that nobody ever puts toilets in their role-playing games, and yet I've talked about it at least two or three times in videos, this is where we're going, people. We're going we're going to the lavatory. Ah, dear. All right, let's work on this little sucker. This is too much fun. There are very few times that one gets to actually live stream about the use of toilets in their role-playing games, and today is the day. I can just see the number of people disappearing. It's like, oh, what the heck do I want that for? Because you want to have poo monsters. Let's get real, poo monsters. Anyway, bathrooms, so common in classical world, disappeared in medieval Europe. Okay. Except in monasteries, except in certain circumstances, baths were required for ordinary people. Until Victorian times, cleanliness was fundamentally ungodly. Okay, baths were taken in transportable wooden tubs. So it's our bathing area is probably very close to the notes on this. Yes, there it is. Wooden tubs. We're going to have wooden tubs in here at some point, so let's mention that one, since we're talking about baths already. Okay, so they would moved inside, and summer the sun would could warm the water for the bather. Yes, that sounded like a nice idea. Privy was ensured with a tent or canopy. You got to love it. It's not even a long drop. You get a tent or a canopy. Keep the water. There's your hole. Do your thing. In English, garderobe has come to mean a private toilet in a castle or other medieval building, usually a small hole discharged to the outside. Yes, such toilets were often placed inside a small chamber, leading by association to the use of the term garderobe to describe them. Technically, a garderobe were small rooms or large closets in which the latrine was located. These closets were often used for storing valuables. Lovely. Let's store our valuables in our poo room. God, I love this entry even more. Okay, so you gotta love the medieval times, don't you? Okay, so it's a small closet. A small closet with a hole with a hole leading outside now my understanding is the lavatory did not have a rather advanced system. It's not like you would flush this sucker. You're not flushing your doobies down there, okay? It's just basically going to out the back. Okay. Forgot the name of the structure for keeping birds of prey. It keeps sending me to Atlanta Falcons football stadium. Yeah, that ain't going to help us. Yeah. Has anybody ever seen a castle with a football stadium in it? I don't think so. So I understand your frustration there, Fred. If you have a lavatory, you have a cesspit. Okay, so let's a small closet with a hole leading outside to a cesspit or the moat. Yeah, that's right. That's where your stuff is gone. Cesspit or moat. Now, I understand they did still have a seating system for them. So there is at least a seat. So a wooden seat with a hole cut out would be positioned over the waste hole. There we go. We have 2 sentences. Now, I have no idea if they ever had toilet paper. They probably didn't. They probably didn't necessarily have paper waiting for you to sort of wad up and clean yourself off with. So yeah, let's keep reading. Maybe we'll find out a little bit more. Be prepared, people. I'm surprised. I was expecting more people to run away. I saw the numbers drop down by about 2 and then it started to creep back up by 1. So back to toilets. Outside, such toilets were often placed inside a small chamber leading to a station. Yeah, no, we said that. Technically, we're a small chamber. No, we said that. But a description of the garderobe and the Dongal Castle indicates that during the time when the castle garderobe was in use, it was believed that ammonia was a disinfectant, that visitors' coats and cloaks were kept in the garderobe. Really? Really? Man, they kept everything in there. Okay. Right, yeah, chamber pot out the window. Probably your most common thing. You're going to have a lot of fun with a chamber pot. Okay, the solar. Let's do the solar, shall we? The solar is not quite as Avery is the structure for keeping falcons. Okay, all right. So you've found the one for the birds of prey. All right, let's include that little sucker, shall we? We'll put it underneath here, and I'm going to just cut and paste what you've written in here because it looks like you've pulled it out. But I wanted to go back to the solar. So I'm just going to do a bit quick cut and paste here. For now, is the structure for keeping falcons. It's large with room for birds to fly and be trained without getting loose. Okay, so that's your aviary. All right, so these are your falcons. or birds of prey. Yeah, sweet. All right, let's go back to the solar. Here we go. Now, the solar is a confusing little room, I'll tell you that now. Left hand for the cleaning and hand for shaking. Gotta love it. Anyway, solar. Let's deal with the solar. The room in the castle called the solar was intended for sleeping and private quarters and used by the lord's family. This is the key thing. It became a private sitting room favoured by the family. The solar suite of rooms was extended to include a wardrobe. The solar was a room in many English and French medieval manor houses, great houses and castles. In such houses, a need was felt for more privacy to be enjoyed by the head of the household, and especially by the senior women of the household. The solar was a room for their particular benefit, in which they could be alone or solo, away from the hustle, bustle, and noise and smells of the great hall. Yes, because there's a lot of people in the great hall, not necessarily a great place to be. The solar was generally smaller than the great hall because it was not expected to accommodate so many people, but it was a room of comfort and status, and usually included a fireplace. So we're going to, and tapestries. So we've got a few things we can include into our solar. It serves a couple of different purposes, so we will include them as best we can, and with as few words as possible. Are you sleeping? Sleeping, and private quarters used by the Lord's family. That's what we want to do. Now, what other purpose did it have? It had a few other purposes. Fish tank room with sculptures. I don't know where we're going with this. I am just trying to come up with what are the sorts of rooms you find in a castle, and then tell you and describe you what it is, what you would find there. That's really what I'm trying to do today. Okay. So it's a private sitting room. Copy, and we need to make sure we include what you would find there. So there's a few things. So a luxurious. I don't know how. Yeah, okay. Private sitting room with what? Bed. Tapestries. Where else would you keep poisonous fish so we can harvest their poison for our enemies? We need a fish tank. Put your own fish tank in your castle. we're not including a 007 villain fish tank in here. Okay, all right. You can do that yourselves. I'm not doing it for you. Anyway, wall hangings, decorative woodwork, fireplace. There. Fireplace. That ain't gonna help us in the slightest. Let's just get rid of this. Did I manage to stuff that up a little bit? Yes, I did. And let's try again. This time without the formatting. Okay, now, what's the other thing? Because I've seen a couple of these pictures of these things, because it's not so easy to find what's actually in it, but you can see from the pictures there'd be tables, chairs, wooden tables, wooden table, chairs, a couch. I did notice that some of them had like a couch, like a sort of a seat, something for seating more than one individual. What else did we have? We've got that. And modern in a mansion house of Western France, the solar was sometimes a separate tower or pillar. Okay, but I need to know what is actually in there. I don't think I've ever seen a solar that had a piano in it or musical instruments. So it's not like a music room. Okay. Solar was often mistaken for having to do with the sun, but this is not so. Okay. The error was may result from the common usage of the solar. Embroidery, reading, and writing. Solitary activities. So, embroidery, reading, and writing. So these are the sorts of things we want to include in here. Embroidery, equipment, books, writing utensils. Writing utensils. Okay, there we go. There is our solar. For those of you who are wanting to include a solar in there, you can. Bed chambers. Now, bed chambers were kind of, I don't think you're going to need too much help with me with that one. I think I've run out of time anyway. The Great Hall we've covered in a lot of detail. I don't need to do that again. Anyway, so I think that is not too bad. Do we have a few rooms left? Yes, we do. But, I mean, it's a castle. At the end of the day, we started with one, and we're probably going to wind up finishing with how many different potential types of rooms? Almost 50. Almost 50 different types of rooms. We haven't done the kennel or the buttery yet, throne room, wardrobe. So I'll keep working on sort of what you would find there so that it makes it a little bit easier for you to sort of build the details around your rooms. So it's easy to sort of like, okay, what do I find there? Because this is one of the things I always found difficult myself. So, yeah, we did all right. We'll, of course, be back in about 2 months. I think in about 2 months. I think that's about right. About 2 months we should be back here, and we'll fill out a bit more of this. In terms of now, for those of you who are looking for more of the, the cost of building your modular castle and the construction times and the area and stuff like that, which is the reason I haven't got that prepared, is I haven't actually been with my group for about 3 weeks now. I think it's going on 4 weeks. It's been about a month. And if I had spent time with my my buddies, particularly JP, who's a quantity surveyor, then I would have had more of that sorted out for you. But because we just haven't had a chance to sort of sit down and chat about this sort of stuff, and I haven't had a chance to show them the fighter class that I built, we would have discussed a lot of these things, and I just haven't had a chance to do that because he hasn't been around. And he's the person to do that, because he knows far more about advanced Dungeons and Dragons and castle construction than I do. So he's definitely the person to discuss this with. So we will definitely come back round to this and start looking at that, but I really need to have more of a discussion with him. And I remember he had found some resources that he thought was a bit more useful to me, but also too, I need his brain. Alone, it's hard to do on your own without, being a smart little shit. And I'm not that clever. But I'll get there. Don't you worry. We'll get there. But we've done pretty well for today. Charge, but the square base foot upgrade hovel is cheap. Yeah, okay. I see what you're trying to do here, Fred. Simplify. Anyway, I think that's it for today. I suppose I should at least let you know what we're doing for the rest of the week. So let's at least pull up that so you can see what we're doing for the. Well, I don't know if I can show you. Will I show you? No, I won't show you. I will just tell you what is coming for the rest of the week. Those of you who are still here and who are actually interested and would like to know what I'm covering for the rest of the week. So, first off, learning to improvise. So this is Game Master preparation. That will be tomorrow, same time. I think it's my Tuesday. I'll be covering the Argent Serpent in Monster Lore. This is from Esper's Emporium of Esoterica. So this is a monster. I think it's pretty much ready to go. If you're in North America, that'll be your Monday. I believe my Tuesday, your Monday. And then my Wednesday, but your Tuesday in North America, but Wednesday for me in New Zealand, we'll be covering the Champion character creation for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Thursday for me, but Wednesday for North America, we'll be doing magic mechanics for Dungeons & Dragons 4e. This will be the last one I do covering the mechanics of Dungeons & Dragons 4e for a very long time. I don't plan to come back to that for a while. And at the end of the week, a bit earlier, in New Zealand it'll be 10 a.m. rather than 12 p.m. for me. I'm not sure what time that will be for you in North America. We'll be looking at the final upgrade for the Monk for Dungeons & Dragons 5e, or at least making it 5e compatible. I have a lot of things that I have already planned out. It should go quite quickly. It should get done. I am contemplating eliminating chi, or key points, or discipline points, or whatever the heck they're calling. I'm tempted to eliminate limited resource stuff and simply have a different system in place. So for those of you who are interested in that, I am definitely interested. Now the poll, I have forgotten about the poll. Thank you for pointing it out, Fred. I had forgotten the poll. Let us at least check the poll. Okay, so do you know, I just lost it. Do you know what rooms you might need in a castle? Yes, so 52%. Not sure, 29%. Well, you'll be a lot more sure now after this. No, 11%. Just watching, 5%. Okay, so hopefully that'll help. So end of the week for me is we're going back to the monk class and doing a redesign. I have no intentions or desire to look at Wizards of the Coast's Unearthed Arcana. I frankly think that they have lost their way. And so I'm doing my own thing nowadays. And yeah, you're welcome to come along and see what I'm working on. Decide if you want to implement it yourself or just download it off Patreon if you wind up becoming a patron member. Okay, because that'll wind up that's where it's going to go. Anyway, I want to say a big, huge thank you for all of you who have been in the chat. It's been a great time. Thank you very much. Thank you to my patrons. For those of you who have been commenting, specifically Fred Hubber, who's been at it quite a lot, and Derp, your feedback has been fantastic. I do appreciate it. Those of you who have just been watching or rewatching, thank you too. And hey, no matter where you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, the night, or the wee early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.